Let me just check on Twitter very quick. Should be live.
Can you hear like there's like work, like some crane is like working on the background? I don't know if it's audible. I hope
It's
not.
a little bit audible, but it doesn't really bother me, honestly.
Maybe I'll use my.
It's very quiet in the background. Yep.
Yeah. But now that you've mentioned it, I can't stop, not listening to it. But yeah, well, hi folks. Thank you so much, Kenny, for joining us today. We have Kenny from LayerZero, who's joining Stacking Sats with pSTAKE. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, this is a stream where we just sit and yap about Bitcoin, and we like to bring on interesting people to talk about interesting stuff. Today we have LayerZero and Kenny join us to talk about interoperability and what's new in the Bitcoin ecosystem. Hey Kenny, how's it going?
Hey, doing well. Thanks so much for having me today.
Where are you speaking in from?
I'm here in Vancouver, Canada.
Oh, nice.
Yep.
Must be quite late for you, but thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, of course, no worries.
Hey, Bart, how have you been?
Hey, good. For me it's quite early. I'm in Bangkok, so my day just started. So yeah, glad to be here.
Nice. Let's get right into it. Actually, before getting into the topics that we have, which is BTC and interop, we like to touch upon some latest things that have been happening in crypto. I think we're seeing this kind of boom in SocialFi and consumer crypto. SocialFi, obviously, a lot of things on Solana are popping up, like Tribe.fun or Cloud, where people are launching their own token. Although not newer concept, it might just be, the timing, which is a very big thing in crypto, right? Like if you get the timing right, you get a lot of things right. You don't want to be too early or too late to the narrative. And we obviously had the abstract mainnet, which is, probably a big step in consumer crypto. So Kenny, any thoughts on that? Have you been following these things lately, or you're just on the interop timeline on crypto Twitter?
No, I've also been following a lot of the other developments in the space as well. I think it's interesting, right? Like to your point, like a lot of these new social apps like Clouds and like Tribes, they were essentially trying to accomplish what Frontech set out to do like last cycle or like about a year and a half ago, right? And so I do think there's some element of like timing and really like trying to capture a lot of interest in the space. And I think it's really just like they have I guess like a late mover advantage by being able to learn and iterate from some of the things that maybe Frontech could have done better on. But yeah, I think it's interesting. I do think there's room for SocialFi in crypto for sure to be able to kind of apply market dynamics to trade trends or speculate on things in like just for like social trends and everywhere else. I think that makes a lot of sense. So yeah, more power to them. Interested to see more social developments coming from them in the future.
Yeah, I saw actually an application that went live on Solana or is going live on Solana pretty soon, which is where basically you can trade narratives. I think that would be an interesting one, especially for crypto, right? Because the industry, if you like it or not, is based on narratives. It runs on narratives, so that might be an interesting one.
Yeah, for sure, especially with like the rise of apps like Kaido, right, where like you have an easy way to get access and insights into what trends and what areas of crypto are really capturing people's attention, and so applying some sort of like I guess like pricing formula or like some sort of like being able to trade those, I think is something that's super interesting and that's very unique to this cycle, right? We didn't really have a lot of these innovations last cycle.
Absolutely. Something else that unique to this cycle is obviously AI. And Bart, you have some experience working in the AI industry in the past. How are you looking at the news of DeepSeek and a small team wiping off multiple trillions of dollars from the US stock markets?
I didn't see it coming, that's for sure. It was like very a big surprise, but I think it's a good thing. That's just how innovation works, right? So and then everybody else will be on their toes and start working a little bit harder. But the biggest part of it is I think that it really makes AI even more accessible than it already was. And I mean, this is definitely going to change everyone's life. Like there's no doubt about it. So it's nice to see that it's very much tied into the crypto world where everybody on crypto is immediately like jumping on this. So it's kind of the bleeding edge, right? So I think there's always going to be this close correlation. But yeah, I'm just curious to see where this is going. But we've also been dabbling into sort of AI and started using agents and things like that. And it's just I think it's phenomenal. So I'm I'm glad to see it. So just curious where this is all gonna go. But it will be fast. I think within the next years, a lot of things are gonna change.
It's almost like the internet moment, right? We'll just have to see.
Yeah. I think
there is
even more
not.
actually.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be even more impactful than anything else before. It's just, which is great, but also a little bit scary, I guess. So we'll just see where we end up. But I mean, I'm excited for it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Coming to the topic of discussion today, which is around interop, can you, for those of you who might be new to the stream or might be living under a rock, can you first tell a bit about LayerZero and also explain in as simply as possible what interoperability in crypto is?
Yeah, absolutely. So LayerZero is an omni-chain interoperability protocol. Right now, we connect over 100 chains between multiple VMs, including EVM, Solana, and also Move. What LayerZero allows you to do is really send any arbitrary packet of data on the internet from one chain to another. So when people think of interop, the lowest hanging fruit use case is usually just like value transfer. Like, I have USDC or USDC or USDT on one chain, and I want that same token on another chain. And so I need something to be able to bridge those funds from, Ethereum to Binance Smart Chain, Avalanche, etc. And so that's one of the use cases that LayerZero fulfills. But on top of that, there's a number of use cases that we fulfill that lie outside of value transfer, right? Things like NFTs, just sending arbitrary state data between chains. So, very vast and really like an infinite number of use cases of things that you can build on LayerZero. What interoperability means, I guess, if we take what interoperability means in like the purest sense, really it's just like the ability for computers to kind of exchange information between each other, right? And so if we apply that same definition to blockchains, and we almost think of these blockchains as their own separate machines that are like have some sort of like computing power, right? It's the ability to transfer information or send state data, basically any communication primitive between these chains, and that's exactly what LayerZero is.
Thank you so much, Kenny, for that. In terms of where it stands or where it lies in the UX world of crypto, would you say that interop is like, let's say, a superset wherein chain abstraction comes under interop, the intents come under interop, bridges come under interop, or is chain abstraction the one that supersedes everything else?
Yeah, chain abstraction's like interesting. I think if you were to take a look at, I think chain abstraction is kind of like it's a bit of a nebulous area, right? No one really has a clear definition for what chain abstraction is. I think there's like a number of things, right? Interop definitely lies at like on some level of chain abstraction, right? Because for example, LayerZero, we provide services to where everything is source chain gas abstracted. So if I want to bridge from like Avalanche to BNB chain, but I don't have any BNB on destination, we'll actually front you a little bit of that upfront cost, right? So on some level, there are aspects of interop that are embedded within chain abstraction, but I think chain abstraction is kind of its separate realm, right? There are other apps like Privy where with the abstract launch that you kind of alluded to earlier, where like each different websites have like EOAs as a service, or like if I go to a different front end, I have my own wallet for that. I think things like that also kind of fall under the realm of chain abstraction. So there are definitely aspects of interop that kind of like intertwine there, but I don't necessarily think we view them as like one and the same, right? They're all their kind of own separate areas. And yeah, I think that's kind of my take on it.
So it's like it's hard for one to exist without the other.
Exactly.
And there's
right.
kind of like a very fine line between what you would say, connects them in some sense.
Yeah, I think to some extent, like the idea behind chain abstraction, or one of, I guess, like the ideal visions behind chain abstraction is eventually to have this experience that's just crypto, where like you don't necessarily feel like, hey, I'm using Ethereum, or hey, I'm using Solana. All of that's abstracted away from the end user, and you're just doing that kind of all behind the scenes. And so I think interop definitely has a lot to do with accomplishing that mission. It's just a question of, how is that space going to evolve, and really what are the other kind of innovations that are going to be tied in there with interop to kind of fulfill that vision, that eventually you'll just be using crypto and not these distinct chains.
Exactly. Yeah, that is the future, right? Like to really sort of improve on this UX, because I mean, it's a pain. Like even what you just mentioned on sort of these gas payments, like how many times it hasn't happened to me where I'm like stuck with assets because I don't have enough gas to like just move them out, or it's just so annoying. Like, and I'm sure I'm not the only one, right? Who's been through this. So,
I mean, it's been 5 years I've been like at least trading in this industry or been active. And at times I also get stuck. What interface do I use to get from one chain to the other?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
there's problems that you don't know what arises. Is it a gas problem? Is it because there's no bridging for it? Is it a different standard? I think there's a long way to go, and I think the foundations are there. We have obviously there is this movement in a small niche of crypto, right? The interop slash ACC. You have people like Mark from LayerZero. You have
Yeah.
Arjun from LeFi, and you also have LDF from the LayerZero Foundation. She's putting out videos when someone tells me interop is solved, but she's like, no, it's not solved. How do you see that? Because that's a very fun part to something that's very technical, right?
Yeah, for sure. We're actually all in the same office right now. They're a few feet behind me, but yeah, Mark and LDF have done a great job of perpetuating the narrative of interop ACC and interop is solved. And again, like I think blockchain and interop in some ways is like a very intimidating subject, right? For a new user, you have to first understand how a blockchain works. You have to understand that there are multiple chains and that there needs to be some method of facilitating asset transfer, communication, state data between these chains. And so that's kind of like the first step, right? And just learning that, there's a pretty steep learning curve. But I think the easier that you can make those concepts and, through easy narratives or slogans like interop ACC, I think the better it is for just like onboarding people or getting them to understand really what LayerZero is.
Yep, that's correct. Obviously, LayerZero works with the biggest DeFi protocols or just protocols in the industry. I think there've been latest partnerships with I think ENA is in or SUSD is a OFT standard token. You have EtherFi's ABTC as an OFT standard. Recently, there was the move for Tether from USDT to USDT0. That's powered by LayerZero as well. And now, very recently, we also announced that YBTC, which is pSTAKE's Bitcoin LST on Babylon for institutions, that's also going to be an OFT standard for interoperability. So, Bart, maybe you could shed some light on what were the options when you were looking at what is the core problem we wanted to solve for institutions, and how is it that we ended up having YBTC as an OFT standard of LayerZero?
Yeah, so I mean, for us, we've created this LST, which is now really based on sort of institutional clients, where essentially they stake or we stake on their behalf BTC into Babylon, and then we mint an LST on ETL1, and then based on sort of their kind of needs and wishes, we will deploy the LST into various like protocols like in DeFi. And it was kind of there are of course multiple options like for interop, but it just made sense for us to go with LayerZero. It was sort of the adoption is great, like it's a very easy sort of standard to adopt, and it was also kind of tying into the places that or partners wanted to go with the assets. Like that's where LayerZero was already live. So for us, it was like a pretty straightforward choice. And with Bitcoin, as a whole, it's also been like difficult because there is no smart contract inherent like with Bitcoin, right? So that doesn't exist. So we have all these multiple wrapped versions like WBTC, TBTC, CBBTC, like all of these like take different approaches to like Bitcoin deposits, like wrapping them differently. So we have this lack of sort of trustless bridges. So all of this like made it a little bit complicated to like move these assets around. So for us, like having YBTC and really choosing sort of LayerZero, we kind of add to this one place where all the assets use the same kind of standard to move things around, which is always OFT standard, and it has made sense for us. So now we launched like YBTC last week. LayerZero is live, so we're starting to move the assets around. So we've already sent it to a few places like Base, I think Parachain. We're looking at like it was Core, right? No, Corn. Sorry, Corn. A few other places that we're looking at. So it just made sense for us. So I'm very happy that this partnership is live, and it's again, it depends a bit on where our clients wants to go, but so far, wherever they said they want to go, it's sort of okay because LayerZero is there. So and that's exactly what we wanted. So
Yeah, that's pretty much omni-chain Bitcoin for you, right? And
pretty much.
I think a concern for institutions, I believe, also is that they don't want to take on additional risks, right? Because these are people that have been holding their BTC in probably a cold storage forever. So these institutions are either
Correct.
minor funds that are being just sitting onto their BTC, and they don't want to take on additional risks. And the fact that there is the most possible social proof for LayerZero, that helps to add things as well. I think from a UX perspective purely, the fact that YBTC on multiple chains, as small as the fact that the YBTC on multiple chains can just have the same address rather than bridged address, which will be different on different chains. I think that's pretty cool that LayerZero kind of allows you to do. But Kenny, on the
Correct.
flip, on the Bitcoin side, because there is, I'm not sure how into you are into the Bitcoin ecosystem, especially in terms of these L2s and side chains. I think by absolute total numbers, there are no more Bitcoin L2s today than Ethereum L2s. Obviously, a lot of these chains are just side chains that don't really fully settle on Bitcoin or use the finality of Bitcoin, but it's coming, right? And it's coming pretty sooner than people expect to be. I think there'll be more foolproof L2s on BTC than Ethereum in the next 1 or 2 years. So, how do you see, both personally as well as from a LayerZero's perspective, an interop problem arising then? Because now you have around 70 chains. All these 70 chains have their own version of BTC. They are not connected in any sense at all. So, do you think that this is a problem that's gotten too far away pretty soon, or it's something that can still be solved?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's something that can still be solved, right? I think you made a really good point. There's kind of been this like Cambrian explosion of, BTC L2s, or even just L2s for that matter, right? This cycle, especially with Bitcoin being an asset that makes sense to have on every chain, regardless of VM. We're seeing a lot of these Bitcoin L2 sprout ups, right? And so I think on some level there is liquidity fragmentation risk amongst these L2s if, let's say, they all have their unique version of they all have their version of Bitcoin that's like compatible with their chain. I think what we do to solve that and alleviate that is really like things like the OFT standard, right? Where you can have this same asset deployed on multiple chains and then kind of use that in like have native deployments of that same asset on multiple Bitcoin L2s, and then through easy front ends like Stargate, be able to bridge that back and forth, right? So while I do think maybe it's like slowly starting to, I guess, pile up the number of Bitcoin L2s in the space, I don't think it's an issue that's completely unsolvable, right? I think, even with what we have today, like the integration that we have with pSTAKE, right? Having the ability to deploy, any sort of Bitcoin LST on multiple chains, I think does a lot to solve that, right? That way you can almost think of it as like, I have the same asset, I'm just moving it in different execution environments. And then kind of along those lines, at that point, like the execution environment it holds a lot less weight, right? Because then you're able to get the same asset, the same amount of that asset on any other chain, and then use it freely for DeFi in that ecosystem. So that's kind of what we're doing. We think that, we've created a very scalable solution where it's hopefully very easy for people who have already integrated the OFT standard to just deploy that same contract and then wire it to their previous deployments. So that's kind of, how we view the potential liquidity fragmentation risk amongst these Bitcoin L2s, and really the steps that we're taking to solve that.
Yeah. Otherwise, we would have to like probably create new wrap versions for YBTC, which then, I don't know, there's like a YBTC E, YBTC A, B, C, like it would have been horrible, right? So the fact that we can avoid it,
right? Yeah. With like, then at that point, the you don't own the contracts, those token contracts that are created through the wrapped asset bridge, right?
Exactly.
And then similarly, right, there's this issue of like double wrapping. If like, you have a wrapped asset coming from one chain and then you want to go to another chain, it just creates this really messy kind of like difficult developer experience that no one wants to deal with. And so by creating like this mesh deployment that LayerZero has, where you can go from chain A to chain B to chain C back to chain A with all native deployments that are entirely owned by your team, I think that's really the key part of what we're trying to perpetuate.
Exactly. That and sort of the reduction, like where we're not relying on centralized bridges, is sort of the main reasons why we did it. So
absolutely. Yep.
Then it also makes sense to scale this product for us, right? I think you can look at it as two ways to scale, let's say, pSTAKE's offering. It's either you expand to more input assets, wherein right now we are just accepting native BTC, which is where a lot of the Bitcoin is currently sitting, or you expand to these individual versions of BTC, which is wrap BTC, TBTC, or BTC on a particular L2, which has its own, denom, its own contract, and all these things, or you just expand on the output asset, which is YBTC. and that's what we've taken a strategic decision to do. Like, we are the only ones. Like, I think pSTAKE and Lombard are the only ones that accept native BTC, and how we scale is through YBTC through LayerZero, wherein we can just take YBTC to these multiple chains, and people can still be safe that they are depositing BTC and not any other wrapped versions of it. I think that's something that uniquely LayerZero allows us to do.
Yeah, 100%. We're working to integrate, every kind of different version of BTC from the ground up, right? Whether it's just like a static, non-dynamic, non-repricing version of WBTC that literally just tracks the price of Bitcoin one-to-one, or if it's, these different Bitcoin LSTs now. And again, we're seeing a lot of those assets sprout up too, right? Like there are bits and pieces of this Babylon movement that are a little bit analogous to like Eigenlayer and like ETH LRTs in like around a year ago, right? And so these days we're looking to capture a lot of these Bitcoin LSTs as OFTs, and similar to how like we were doing that with like Eigen LRTs back in like earlier in 2024.
Yeah, I think it's pretty interesting, right? Because I think Babylon will launch pretty soon. The yields will start to come pretty soon too. Like, I think the biggest problem with Eigenlayer, not problem I would say, but the question was, where are the yields, or when will the yields come? And on the flip side was on the slashing aspect. So it'll be very interesting to see how this dynamic plays out, because Babylon launches pretty soon, so the yields will start to flowing pretty soon. Yields, at least a number that you can put on, when the Babylon baby token goes live and rewards are shared, and then they go live with slashing at the same time too. So it kind of takes a leap in, you could say, potentially restaking much more faster. And I think with kind of the narrative that we started seeing is people, I think, seem to be done with memes or just speculation. There seems to be forming a consensus on CT as well, that maybe it's time for utility to come back. I think we saw a tweet from CZ that was like, everything aside, fundamentals will never go out of fashion. Believe in fundamentals. So we might just see a awakening wherein the biggest narratives of the bear cycle, which was modularity and restaking. I actually put a tweet about this. Let's just stop with all the BS and let's focus on what's working in crypto for crypto. Obviously, the consumer side, the AI side is great for something that's external facing, but not everyone needs to know about restaking. But the people that do need to know about it need to do something about it a bit more, right? So it's more into fashion. So
Yeah,
let's see how it goes. I think it'll be very interesting.
Yeah, crypto is extremely reflexive, right? I feel like in a bear, you've kind of anyone who doesn't have deep rooted interest in the space has kind of left. And so you're able to discuss these more intimate topics like restaking and modularity because people will understand them. At that point, like anyone who's not even remotely interested in the space has already left. But when you invite in more market participants across like a range of different backgrounds and different levels of familiarity with like blockchain and crypto, you kind of have to look for things that are a little bit more appealing to the general public. And so I think it's reflexive in that way, right? Like small group of entrants who are very interested, larger group who are maybe not as interested.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It was also interesting that you said that that you're really focusing on getting all these LSTs and anything related sort of on the Bitcoin ecosystem to have LayerZero there, right? I think that's smart, right? Because there are more projects coming around, and if LayerZero becomes the default choice for these newer protocols that are coming, then you get this network effect, and then it becomes like the go-to interop solution for like anything related to BTC, which is good. I think it's a smart choice from you guys. It's definitely one of these things that has come up lately. In the last year, I would say anything Bitcoin related. So being on top of that is it's a smart choice.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, absolutely. I think market adoption has a lot to do with different network effects, and the desire for projects in like a similar vertical to want to work with us and build on LayerZero. So, we
and BTC,
Yep, sorry.
exactly. No, I was going to say, and Bitcoin makes sense, right? Like if we're
Yeah.
talking about sort of things like meme coins and stuff like that, like if we're going back to the real sort of applications, then this one really makes sense, right? Like it is the largest asset, and it's what people really want to move around. So yeah, good
For
choice.
sure. Yeah. I mean, if you take a look at, the most bridged assets over time, it's generally just like stable coins, different versions of ETH and Bitcoin, right? And so
Exactly.
that's kind of what we're looking to capture as well.
Yeah.
I think
That
it's
makes sense.
ultimately the asset that matters the most, or possibly for a lot of people, the only asset that matters. And we were actually discussing this in the previous stream. we saw these developments. We actually had the team from LayerEdge, which is basically a Bitcoin scaling solution. They were on, and we were discussing, if everything that the Ethereum ecosystem is offering, so not ETH, but Ethereum, the network itself, on the Bitcoin side, could it be that just it just go obsolete in the future? Because why if it's about the network, if it's about the liquidity, and if BTC is able to solve that, which is probably the only asset that will ever be able to solve it, why not just build on Bitcoin in the future? So that's
Yep.
a very, I feel like the Bitcoin ecosystem, the threat is to Ethereum more than anything else. I think the real threat, not solve flipping ETH, but BTC just going miles ahead of ETH
Yeah.
than already is.
Yeah, and I think people like to get back and forth between like, what is the dominant chain or the dominant stack? Is it like, different L2s, or is it Solana? I think Bitcoin is the one asset that's like completely agnostic to all of those kind of different solutions, right? Like it makes sense. It makes as much sense to have Bitcoin on like an EVM chain as it does to have on Solana. And so I think that's really the one asset where it makes sense to have everywhere. And so that's why we really want to support developers like pSTAKE and teams like you guys, and really anyone looking to kind of like take and capture the, I guess, like the asset in crypto with the most liquidity and kind of move it around chains, right?
Yeah,
Definitely.
absolutely. We saw the Merkle database from LayerZero. Is this LayerZero entering the DS space, or it's something that builds on top of the OFT standard that you have?
Yeah, so we have a new data primitive that is called LZ read, and basically what it enables you to do is, for a lot of applications, like they want to fetch data from another chain and then have that data be consumed, right? And so we've built exactly just that. So if I'm like an application on an L2, but I want to read, the price of like an asset on a UniV3 pool on Ethereum, I can actually do that, right? So I can send an instruction to fetch that data from Ethereum, apply some sort of computation to it, whether it's like data cleaning or just like aggregation, and then send that back to the application to consume. And so there's been like a number of really cool advents that have come out of LZ Read. There's a number of use cases that are supported, including like cross-chain governance. One use case that I think is particularly cool is like this concept of shadow NFTs. And so this is something that we did for ApeChain as an example, right? So for ApeChain, obviously they've created this whole ecosystem around like Bored Apes, Mutant Apes, etc. But those collections all live on ETH-L1. And so what they can do is they can read state from L1, Ethereum L1, and then use that to verify and check for ownership of those NFTs, and then pass those back to applications on ApeChain who might be looking for those holders on ETH-L1. So basically proof of ownership of these NFTs without actually having to bridge it over to the new chain.
Great.
That's pretty
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
I think
Very interesting.
someone like Oracles would benefit a lot from this, right? To kind of integrate into their not just price feed, but then the actual exchange rate of an LST. If someone wants to track liquidations on an L2, but the source is coming from an L1, I think that's pretty interesting or even much more efficient to do it this way. That's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all part of chain abstraction, right? Like that's another step in the right direction. Yeah.
For sure. Yep, absolutely.
Awesome. So the last maybe question before we call it a day, Kenny and Bart, to both of you, what does an omni-chain future look like to you?
Yeah. So for me, it's easy, right? It's spreading OFT adoption and really like having different versions of assets that people want in a way that's easily accessible across multiple chains, right? I don't necessarily think different asset classes or different asset groups should be pigeonholed within one developer or execution environment. You should be able to have those on any chain that you want, right? And to really create like a more cohesive crypto ecosystem as a whole, I think that's like absolutely a necessity, right? Having these assets in a way that's easily accessible for anyone. And so for us, like that's why we really think like having OFTs on or like having teams develop the OFT standard across chain is really key to that thesis, right? This way, like again, like there are probably different elements of each chain that are a bit different from each other, but like having the same asset or like the same asset with the same pricing on another chain and being able to unlock different like opportunities on another chain with that same asset is really key to the thesis that we're trying to perpetuate.
Yeah. So basically, tokens that would be native across multiple chains using OFT like standards, right? Like this, and then no more bridges. I think that's a big one as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe like I think it would be like contracts that can communicate natively as well across chains. Like you land on one chain and then you borrow the asset on the other chain, like something like this. Would also be
cross-chain borrow lending is a huge use case as well. Really, like any primitive that we have today in crypto, whether that be like AMMs, cross-chain borrow lending, gaming. Ideally, we want all of that to incorporate some elements of like I can do this same thing on another chain, or like I can use some trade-offs of like a chain like that a chain might be better than another chain at, and then use like the same level of like asset transfer to be able to leverage that and take advantage of that, right?
Yeah. And then I guess the last step would be that people just don't know which chain, like they don't care, right? It's not important anymore. Yeah.
Yep,
exactly.
That
will then we succeeded. Or LayerZero, then you guys can say, okay, we've done it.
Yep, exactly.
Awesome. I think that we've come on the time as well for you, Kenny. Thank you so much for joining us. Before we let you go, we actually like to end these streams in a very different manner. Actually, you might have seen the American talk shows. How they do rapid fire. So we'll do something like that, which is kind of related to crypto as well, and then we'll end the stream.
Sure.
Yeah. Awesome. So first question I have for you is: do you think that crypto events are overrated?
Or sorry?
Do you think crypto events are overrated?
Sorry, do you mind typing that out?
If crypto events are overrated
or overrated, I think to some extent, right? It's the same group of people in a different city with like a bunch of the events that are very similar. Like you have open bar with like a DJ, right? Like there's only so many things I can talk to about someone while like trying to talk over like obnoxiously loud music, like a few drinks deep, right? So I do think they are overrated, but that's only if you're attending way too many of them, right? I think it's always good to go to one or two conferences, maybe a little bit more than that per year, and discuss like relevant things with people in the space that are like more involved. Crypto is obviously very narrative driven, and each kind of few months there's a new narrative for me. So I do think there's inherent value in that. But if you're going to too many in a row, then 100% overrated.
Give me the right signal. Yep. Next question is: what are some sports that you enjoy, Kenny?
My favorite sports are American football. That's number one for me. I grew up watching that, and with the Super Bowl coming up, especially, I am a little bit sad that the season's coming down to an end. Other than that, I also enjoy. Next is like March Madness with college basketball, so it's another one, and then also baseball. Now that I've been up in Canada for like a year and a half, I've been to a few hockey games, but still don't necessarily understand the sport. So that's maybe one that I'll try to get more into.
Yeah. Does American football actually have a new audience recently because of Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce, or is that just a meme?
I think there's definitely like a lot of new interest in football just because of Travis Kelce. I mean, like he's just like a football player, and I think this year he was like one of the top 10 most Googled people in the world, right? So I think there are new people looking and paying attention to the sport. Like if you ever watch like a Chiefs game, they'll always cut to Taylor Swift, right? Because she's usually at the games that Travis Kelce's playing at home. But if anything, it's really just like little girls who are fans of Taylor Swift. So that's about it.
Awesome. Second last question, Kenny. When would you say that interop is solved?
I'd say in 2024, right? Like I think that's what a lot of LDF and Mark have been writing about with like their LayerZero being able to scale and expand to basically as many new chains entered the space in 2024. And being able to onboard a lot of these different assets that you mentioned, right? Athena, EtherFi, a lot of different, variations of Bitcoin, including some of the pSTAKE tokens, right? So I think in 2024 is really where we can say, a lot of these different assets regarding of, if they're derivatives of like some of these largest cap assets, like, the US dollar or Bitcoin, Ethereum, being able to onboard all of those, and then also being expanded to multi-VM, right? Like prior to 2024, we were primarily only on EVMs with the exception of Aptos, and now we're expanded to Solana. We're going to be live on Movement as well. So like creating like a developer experience that's completely VM agnostic is also something that goes a long way in solving interop.
Absolutely. Let's go. Last question, Kenny. Do you think Satoshi is still out there? And if yes, do you think he or she is active on crypto Twitter?
Um, uh, I think there's a chance he's out there. I think the whole HBO documentary was too far fetched, and I don't think the guy that they narrowed in on is actually Satoshi. But I think there's a chance. Yes, Satoshi's out there, LARPing is just like a regular guy on Twitter, and maybe getting in a view like ETH Maxi versus Bitcoin Maxi debates over the years. So yeah, he could very much be out there. I tend to think that he is, but I mean, we'll see. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, and with that, I think we can call it an end to the stream. Thank you so much, Kenny, for taking the time. I know it's quite late for you out there, but in the short time that we've spoken, we had a really great time learning about Interop a bit more. What the vision for LayerZero is, how pSTAKE is leveraging LayerZero, and hopefully to a future where Interop is actually solved.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me, guys. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank you so
Kenny.
much, Bart, as always, joining us, and look
Happy
forward
to.
to some new stuff from LayerZero and pSTAKE.
Absolutely. Thank you.
That's good.
Thank you so much.
Bye.